joining us today.
Oh, of course.
So I found you on Instagram and I thought, how cool that someone is talking about the science of in vitro fertilization and making it, I don't know, I want to say hip because that makes me sound so old. But you're bringing it into the forefront to a younger generation. You're kind of eliminating the stigma of it being something that has to be hush hush. Why did you decide to get into this field of science?
Yeah, it was more in my undergrad. I was actually leaning towards the medical field, and the higher up I got in my science classes, the more I learned I had a passion for science. I really like the microscopic world, and trying to understand that. And so I lean more towards the science aspect of it, and I like research. I like protocols, like it just like speaks to my OCD perfectionism, like to be really good at protocols and do it over and over and over and over every day. Like, oh yeah, like that's my jam.
So you were in safety patrol, obviously, in school.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I was not good in like grade school. I'll be honest. I was there to like have fun and play sports.
And eat
And
glue.
what's that?
And eat glue.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. No,
all kids.
I was that kid with the glue on the hand. Um, yeah, luckily I learned that science was my jam. And so now I actually have a master's degree in it. And I'm sure some of my high school teachers would be shocked to find out that I got that far.
And why did you choose particularly making embryos? Because that's, I mean, you could have chosen anything. Did you meet someone who was dealing with infertility, or were you inspired by something and thought like, this is now really my jam? Like I found my overall jam, but this is my specific one.
It was more, it kind of has a medical aspect to it. So I get to do all the nerdy stuff and work with my hands, and it kind of has this outcome, this result, versus when you're doing research, you're talking about years and years of working on something that you could get to the end and be like, yeah, we didn't find what we were looking for. Whereas this, like day in and day out, I get to see that outcome. It's kind of a selfish thing, I guess, but yeah, it has that combination of medicine and the microscopic nerd stuff.
So break it down for people who don't know exactly what do you do every day at work.
So every day I'm back in the lab. Like as a patient, if you come in, there's a small chance that you'll even see me. Maybe you'll see me in the hall. But I'm in the lab, so I'm doing all the getting eggs, getting sperm, putting them together, culturing them out for 5 to 6 days. There's a couple other procedures that we do back there, like embryo biopsy. So all day long, I'm doing that, handling eggs, sperm, freezing embryos, thawing embryos, transferring embryos, just every aspect that goes into in vitro fertilization.
Is there do you feel a lot of pressure? Because for some people they have such they have a low sperm count, or they don't have many eggs, or they might just have one embryo and this is their one shot. Do you know their backstories when you're doing this?
Yeah, typically I do. There's a lot of people that kind of fit, I guess, simpler situations. Like, hey, there's the male factor, like his sperm count was a little bit low or not great, but she has plenty of eggs, so we just need to find good sperm and inject them. But then there are definitely tougher cases, cases where she may not have good egg reserve, and we only get a few eggs, and the quality doesn't look great. And he also has really poor sperm. Sometimes we have guys that are azospermic, meaning they don't have sperm in their ejaculate.
Oh.
And so they have to do these other procedures where we go in to, I mean, we're going to say some uncomfortable words, but
That's okay.
penises, vaginas are all funny, right? So we have to go into the testicle, get some tissue, that sperm grow in, and that procedure is called the tessie. And anytime you're doing a tessie, like you're going to be dealing with very low concentrations of sperm. Sometimes those cases, I'll end up spending hours working on those ones. And then there's just other touchy ones where you start to know these patients that come in multiple times because it's failed in the past. I've been involved with people that I know personally, and that makes it a lot tougher when I know the person, because then I see that side of when it doesn't work. And man, infertility it can really rock people's worlds. Like it is a very, very tough disease to battle with.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you refer to it as a disease too, because I had infertility because, and I wasn't trying to have a baby or anything like that. I have endometriosis. So then when they figured out that I had endo, it was a wise doctor who was like, you know what? I was just turning 33 in a week. And she said, why don't we go check your anti-Müllerian hormone, your egg reserve? And
Mhm.
I thought, I'm only 33. Like, what could that be? Anyway, they tested it. And within like 2 days, I get this call from the doctor who tells me, sit down, like, sit down. I'm like, this isn't good.
Mhm.
And she said that I had the egg reserve of like a 0.007. So I wasn't sterile, but I was infertile, and that I, was going to need assistance to get pregnant if I wanted to get pregnant in the future. And then with endo complicating things, I was really given like a short window to get pregnant. And that's why I think I did like 3 or 4 rounds. I can't even remember, which is sad, but I did 3 or 4 rounds just to get eggs because I had such a low reserve and I was getting so little each time and I was super overstimulated. But then, fortunately had my son doing an embryo transfer and all of that with my own eggs. But yeah, it was for sure a hard process, emotionally taxing on the body. But I was always intrigued by the science of it all because without minds like yours and my amazing reproductive endocrinologist, I wouldn't have had my son. I just wouldn't have. That was the disease I have, and infertility was something I had to manage and battle. And I was very fortunate because, as you know, too, IVF is so expensive, and more companies are covering it now, but it's not really always covered. At least in my case, it wasn't. It was very, very expensive.
Yeah. I mean, it's like any diagnosis. It's unexpected. Most people don't grow up thinking like, oh yeah, I'm gonna need IVF. Like I'm gonna have fertility problems. Like that diagnosis comes out of nowhere, and it can really rock your world. And the psychology behind reproduction is, when I came into this field, I never really thought about it. But once I became an embryologist and I started to see that, the psychological aspect of reproduction, like it's fascinating to me. And you see how heavy it is, the burden that people carry going through infertility, the stress that it puts on you, on your relationship. If you're in a relationship, it is tough. And
Yeah.
people need to be validated that like you feel like you're losing your mind going through infertility, and like yeah, it is hard stuff to go through.
Yeah. It's definitely hard stuff. Um, what would you say has been one of your greatest? I mean, I'm sure there's so many success stories, but what has made you feel really, and maybe it didn't pan out the way they necessarily wanted to, but what was something that really inspired you from your job that made you feel like this is why I do what I do?
Yeah, there's been a couple of cases that were really tough and personal. um, One of them, it was someone I knew personally, and it was one of those diagnoses that just it came out of nowhere. So it was someone I knew. She had been kind of recently married, like they'd been kind of trying for about a year, which the year mark is like when you're supposed to say, okay, it's been a year of trying, you should
Mhm.
get checked out. So she reached out to me personally, like, hey, would you mind just doing a semen analysis on my husband? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong. We've just been kind of trying. I just want to make sure. I'm like, sure, no problem. He comes in, drops off a sample, popping under the microscope, and there's nothing there. Like, no sperm.
Oh,
Which, like, you don't want to give that kind of like information to someone you know. Just like, hey, yeah, you need to come talk to a doctor. Like, he doesn't have any sperm. So it turned into this very long, intense process. And yeah, I ended up spending, we did that whole like Tessie procedure, but this one was actually a micro Tessie when it's a much tougher case. And we just could not find sperm. Yeah, it ended up being successful. Like they have a little baby,
Oh,
just turned one recently. But when it's that personal level, it really kind of brings it home.
yeah.
One of my big motivators, I have an 8-year-old daughter,
Mhm.
and all the cheesy cliche things, having a kid for me, like changed my life. It changed my perspective on everything. Like I used to be kind of the stereotypical guy with like, hey, emotions, like I don't do emotions, you know, I'm cool. You know, I got ice in my veins. And then having a kid, oh my gosh, like you can't hide from emotions. Like they make you experience every
Mhm.
emotion, good and bad, and like to the extreme. So all of a sudden I became this person that like I have feelings now, whatever. So that's been a big motivator for me, like especially on long days and long cases. Like I just keep reminding myself, like, hey, everyone, my daughter's name is Violet, and I just think everyone that wants to deserves a chance to have a Violet in their life, you know? Um, yeah, that makes those days, keeps you motivated, makes me emotional,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially on those tough ones, man. It can be emotional.
Oh, yes. Yes. And I think I always say that children choose you. So if you can't be successful at IVF or you can't access IVF, I do believe if you want to become a parent, you can. There's so many other ways. There's adoption, there's foster care. I do feel like children find you. So I never want anyone out there to get discouraged. And it can be super, super discouraging. And not everything has a happy ending, but so many cases do. And especially with the advancements in science and research that it's getting more accessible. I have a friend who is starting to go through the process of IVF with her wife. And she told me that her company is like paying for the whole thing. And to me, that was incredible because she said, we didn't think that we could ever afford it. But now companies are getting more modern in their thinking and they're putting it in their healthcare. So that's to me like huge. It's a tremendous step forward in the way that people are thinking about infertility.
Yeah, it's gained a lot more, infertility's gained a lot more attention. Um, I think it's a combination of things. There's just much more access of care. There's a lot more clinics that are popping up worldwide. The big question is there a rise in infertility, or is it just
Mhm.
becoming less, there's less stigma around it? And so with that, more companies, like you said, are starting to acknowledge like, hey, this is an issue. There's a lot of people trying to get insurances to acknowledge it, to help with the payment, because it's really expensive. And the reason it's so expensive is because most people have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah,
And medicine is expensive, especially if you're paying cash for it.
very expensive.
Yeah, yeah, but we're getting there. The
Yeah.
access is there. It's a big deal.
What's been the response to your social media? Because that's how I found you. And it was, I mean, to me, it was great. I didn't know that you could make embryology cool, but you did. So have you gotten like an overall positive reaction?
Yeah. I mean, I've never been like a social media person very much. I've just always found humor in everything. Like definition of something that's funny is it's ironic. And I've
Mhm.
just found that like life is full of irony. Like
Okay,
there's
Alanis Morissette.
yeah, they're like in society we create all these rules, and like we try to be so cool, and like we want things to be black and white, and like every day like it doesn't, like it's awkward, like life is just awkward. And to me that's funny. And so I've always had this kind of sense of humor, and I've always had friends and family that are like, dude, you gotta like make stuff, like you gotta be creating videos or something. And so, like anyone else, 2020, I hit a point where I was just bored, like sitting at home. I was bored. I was like, screw it, I'm gonna make a couple of TikToks. And people liked them. Like it's kind of validating. Like, I mean, I always thought I was funny, but other people thinking I'm funny, that's pretty cool. Um, and then like, I'm passionate about embryology. Like I enjoy it, and there's a lot of information about it. I didn't know people would be interested in like the sciencey nerdy side of it. So I kind of just like started making some jokes about it, and the response has been really positive. Like everyone likes humor. Like I think infertility kind of highlights that fact of like, hey, we're trying to do all these things, and as kids we're taught that like, I don't know, the words penis and vagina are like weird words. At the same time, they're kind of funny. And so it's talking about IVF and fertility treatments, that nice combo of like, hey, here's this thing it's really heavy, like it's serious, like I take it serious, like what people go through, but at the same time, like let's kind of poke fun at it and
Yeah.
let's make
No,
jokes.
it makes a discourse and having a conversation about it so less intimidating if you can joke, because I remember being in those doctor's offices and you're just like so intimidated and like, what's going on, and is something wrong with me? And yeah, and it's they're hard conversations, so to be able to make light of it and have a little fun and laugh going through a tough time, it's important, and you're helping people do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a secondary reason that I kind of switched over to Instagram because TikTok's not very professional. Like it's kind of a, not a very serious place. But then I switched over to Instagram too. I also want to like understand the patient experience more.
Mhm.
Like I said, as an embryologist, I'm kind of hidden in the back, and so I do want to engage with people a little bit more and understand their experience, because everyone everyone comes to like reproductive technologies and needing that for many different reasons. Not everyone fits the like traditional mold of heterosexual couple.
Mhm.
There are, gay couple, lesbian couple, single people, transgender, and there's so many layers of challenges that people can experience going through IVF, and I want to understand that. I have not personally gone through infertility, and so there's only so much that I can really comprehend on a
Mhm.
personal level. And I'm a person that makes sperm. I'm not a person that makes eggs, and I think a person that makes eggs, they have a whole another set of complications and pressures that they feel. And there's things that are becoming more popular with IVF, like egg freezing to
Mhm.
preserve fertility. And again, we try and make it nice and black and white, and like, oh yeah, it's an insurance plan, basically just come freeze your eggs. And I don't know if it's that simple just to tell someone, hey, just freeze your eggs. It's like, hey, they kind of feel social pressures around that, and just to add more pressure on them, like, hey, just do it. Like, I don't know
Right.
if that's a fair place. And I just want to understand it better.
Yeah, no, it's true. I probably put that social pressure on my friends, my girlfriends, or anyone born with the uterus. I will tell them. They're like, oh, I want to have kids, but I'm not sure, and I'm for the right person. But I definitely want to one day. I was like, then freeze your eggs, and they're like, oh, it's so expensive. I'm like, you can do payment plans, you can whatever, but like you will always have those eggs, and you will always have an option. So the best advice that I ever got, just from a personal standpoint, I found out I was infertile. It was crushing. I wasn't even 33 yet. It was not my life plan. And a woman who had fertility issues in my office, I confided in her, and she ended up adopting her daughter. But she said to me, go for freezing your eggs first. Do it as an insurance plan. Give yourself all the options in the world, even if you don't use them, so that you always had the options and you had the choices and you never regret anything. She said, better to not live with regret. So that's why, I really wanted a child, but I know for other people, it's just the idea of having the option, and it's a good feeling. It's a freedom.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the best thing is to just kind of bring awareness around it. Like, hey, there is this option. Uh, go into a clinic, talk to a doctor, talk about the options, talk about the cost, get some assessment done, see where you're at. Because, like you said, you were only 33. You
Yeah.
had no idea you had this issue. I think it's also just worth trying to validate people too. Like, hey, you're having these fears, and like, we see you. Like, yeah, we get it,
Yeah.
and you're validating having those fears around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being here with us and for telling us your journey and also explaining a little bit of the science. Very intriguing stuff you're doing.
Oh, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. Please come back.
Yeah, will do.